Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. You continue to do well. And everyone should get vaccinated as soon as they can. And we'll crawl out of this thing. Emir Hashem. Tonight's Parsha Shiur is sponsored by my dear friends Sharon and Michael Cronenberg. Leilu Nishmas, Michael's father, Rav Mordechai Yosef, Ben Azriel Zelik Cronenberg, who was a mechanech and a teacher of Jewish children all of his life, and spread Torah wherever he went. And may the words of Torah be Leilu Nishmato. This week we conclude the Chumash Bereishis. Now, the Netziv of Volozhin, Rav Naftali Tzvi of Berlin, in his commentary to Chumash, Ahamik Dover, in his introduction to Bereishit, so he says that Bereishit is what is called in Chazal Sefer HaYoshor, the book of Yoshor. Yoshor has many meanings, as we're going to hopefully elaborate here. And he says, why was it called Sefer HaYoshor? Because he says the Avos were Yeshorim. Now, what does he mean the Avos were Yeshorim? So the simple explanation, translation, the literal translation is they were straight people. Now, our understanding of straight people means that they were truthful and were honest, they were upstanding, they were correct. Yet, if we're honest and we look at the Chumash itself, we will find that sometimes is hard to justify. By Avraham Avinu, we find that he had Sarah tell the Egyptians that she was his sister and not his wife. Now, he had good reason to do so, and that eventually, because of that, Paro and his court were afflicted. But that doesn't quite fit into our definition of Yoshor. But we don't think that Yoshor means to tell a story that isn't true, no matter what the justification may be. So it may be justified, but it's not Yoshor. And then we find by Yitzchak almost a repetition of that story, where he tells Avimelech that she's my sister. And then Avimelech discovers that Rivka is his wife. And Avimelech reprimands Yitzchak. Why did you do this? Look what you could have caused for me. And Yitzchak answers, Rakin Yerushalayim b'mokom hazeh. I did it because it's not a God-fearing society. Everything goes here. And therefore, I had to do it. Again, excusable. We understand. But is that Yoshor? And then we have Yaakov Avinu as the supreme example. Esau will say, Achi Shmo Yaakov, you know why he's called Yaakov? He cheated me twice already. He took the Bechorah, took advantage of me. I was Oyev Yogeya, tired, worn out, hungry. I was desperate for food. So if somebody is desperate for food and you're an Ish Yosher, so you feed him. You don't say, let's make a deal. I'll feed you if you sell me the Bechorah. That's Yosher. And then the bracha, he allowed his mother to pull off that subterfuge, to put on Esau's garments and to put on the goat hair to cover his skin. And no matter how we play with the words, he said, Ani Esau b'chorecha. Anochi Esau b'chorecha. So that's Yosher. And then the entire 20 years in the house of Lavan, they're busy outwitting each other, so to speak. So it's very disturbing, therefore, on the surface. But what is the Netziv saying here? It's called Sefer HaYoshar because of the fact that the Ovos were Yesharim. So there are a number of insights that the Netziv wants us to appreciate and follow through on that are of great importance, great educational value here. First is that Netziv himself points out that Yeshorim means not to be a hypocrite, not to tar others with your own problems. We have, it's well known in psychology, the idea of projection. We project upon others our own weaknesses. So we create a situation where we confuse cause and effect. The effect is how others treat us, but we're the cause of how others treat us because of our behavior. So the Netziv points out that in the Bayis Sheni, in Second Temple times, so he says, okay, we understand Bayis Rishon, where the main sins, so to speak, were Avodah Zarah and Gilui Arayos and Shvichus Damim. There were paganism, and there were sexual immorality, and there was murder. And those are three cardinal sins. So we understand why the Churban came. We understand that the Lord, so to speak, had to take drastic action to straighten the Jewish people out again. But he says in Bayis Sheni, in Second Temple times, so then they were all religious. And they had the Mishnah was being composed, the oral law was being studied, you had great rabbis, you had Shammai and Hillel. What was the problem there? So he points out that that's what Chazal meant when they said there was sinas chinam. Sinas chinam is hypocrisy. People projected upon others their own failings. So they pretended to be pious and they accused others of not being pious. They pretended that they have a higher standard of religion and of morality and of goodness, and others have an inferior standard. And because of that, therefore, great division was sown within the Jewish people. And that's what led to the destruction of the Second Temple. The hypocrisy involved. There's a famous piece from Rabbeinu Menachem Ameiri, who was 14th century Peppergon in northern Spain, southern Provence. He has this great parish to the Talmud called the Beit HaBchira. So there in the Sechet Sota, he has an earth-shattering line that could be written, unfortunately, in many, many generations in Jewish life. He writes about people, I'm quoting from memory, but I think it's accurate. Shemisatfim atzmom betalitot gedolot. They wrap themselves in large talitot, big talis. V'tzitziosei niros bachutz. And their tzitzis can be seen outside. They flaunt them. V'libam rochot me'avim shabashamayim. But their hearts are far away from their Father in heaven. Aleim ani omer, so regarding them do I say the posuk, vayotzitzu kol po'alei ovet. That's the play on words on tzitzis. So that's hypocrisy. But it's more than hypocrisy. It's the projection of one's own weaknesses on others. It's the kettle calling the pot black, which unfortunately is a very human trait, but it's not one that one should adopt. So when we talk about yashrut, the first definition of the Netziv is not to be hypocritical, not to be what we aren't. And that you see from the Avos. Avram Avinu says, Anochi ofar v'efer. I'm nothing. You don't owe me anything. And he says to the king of Zom, Michut v'atzrochnal, I don't want from a thread to a shoelace. El Tomar, and you should not say, Ani yasharti et Avram. I made Avram wealthy. The hypocrite would say, I saved everything. I saved Lot, I saved the king of Zom, etc. I'm entitled to my share. The person that's yashrut says, I'm not entitled to anything. Now that has to do with life itself, with the concept of entitlement. What are you entitled to? And that's a great issue in current life, and in raising children, and in educating the next generation. Because there is a great tendency of entitlement. We're entitled. The United States had a chicken in every pot. Here in Israel, it's the same thing. You're entitled. You're going to get married. You're entitled. They should buy you an apartment. You finished university. You're entitled to get a good job. And when then these things don't work out, many times they don't, through no fault of any human being, they're not, So then the feeling of disappointment, of being cheated, that's the feeling that we have from Esau. He always feels he was cheated, even though he's the cause. His being cheated is the effect, but he thinks in reverse. He always confuses the cause and the effect. If he would not say, Haliteni no min Odom Odom Azeh, he would have been in the problem. That was the cause. The effect is that he sold the Bechorah. He confuses it. He says, you took the Bechorah from me, so you're the guilty party. You will find, studying history and sociology, that almost all totalitarian types of government confuse cause and effect. And therefore, you're able to say that the Jews were the cause for German weakness between the wars, when in reality, the Germans were the cause, the instability of society, which therefore created that the Jews tried to better themselves. So it's a confusion again of cause and effect. So the Avos had that clear. They understood, that's what Sefer HaYoshar means. They understood that lesson. So we find the same thing by Yitzhak. Yitzhak digs wells. The Plishtim stop up the wells. Everything that he does, he's opposed by the Plishtim. So that's the cause. The effect is, Ein yiras Elohim b'makom hazeh. There is no fear of God. I cannot say she's my wife. They reverse it. Oh, you couldn't say she's your wife. You're a liar. Therefore, we can stop up your wells. So that's the hypocrisy of it. And Yaakov faces that his entire life. He faces that with Esau, and he faces that with Lavan. Lavan will say at the end, Abonim bonai, abonos benosai. The daughters are mine, the sons are mine, everything is mine. Kol asher loch liyu. Everything belongs to me. Can you just excuse me just 1 second? Hello? Chaim, I'm in the middle of a Zoom. Give me an hour. So the hypocrisy of it. Esau comes ready to kill him. Esau sends an angel to kill him. Yaakov has to defend himself his entire life. But Esau wraps himself in a big talus and he flaunts his tzitzis and says, I'm right. The other guys, Yaakov is not, he's not honest, he's not good. the Germans as a nation in the 20th century were responsible for 40, 50 million people being killed. But it's not their fault. It's forced upon them. So that's the hypocrisy of it. So therefore, this is called Sefer HaYashar because of the fact that the others were Yasharim. They were not hypocritical. They did not confuse cause with effect. It was clear to them what led to what. I think that that's implied in the great medrash that we know, that we learned when we were children, that Avram Avinu broke all the idols, and Terach came home and he said, what happened there? And Avram said, the big idol got mad at the little idols and he smashed them. So the father said to him, Terach, don't be silly, the idols can't do anything. He said, that's true, so then why do you worship them? That's the tendency of hypocrisy. Oh, the big idol smashed all the little idols. So we know that's not true. It doesn't force me to change my mind. Terach the next day is still in the idol business. Didn't change. The fact that it didn't work, so it didn't work. Nevertheless. So that is one insight into Sefer HaYashar. The Avos were Yasharim. They were not hypocritical. They did not confuse cause and effect. They realized what generated what. And that's Yashar. That really puts you on a straight path, because then you don't fool yourself and you don't project your own weaknesses on others. The second insight that the Netziv says on Yashar: human beings, according to Jewish thought, really according to, I would say, almost any sense of logic, if there is such a thing, human beings are responsible. That's what the Torah made us. Asher kitshonu b'mitzvosov v'tzivonu. I'm making you responsible. You're responsible for what you do and for what you don't do. You're responsible for your words. You're responsible for your hands. You're responsible. You are a responsible human being. That's the difference between humans and animals. Animals are not responsible. They operate on instinct. They have no choice. Human beings are responsible creatures. That's what the Rebbeinu Shalom, he gave within us the spirit of life. Life is responsibility. Again, there's a large section of humanity that wants to avoid responsibility. I'm not responsible. So there are a person commits murder, God forbid, and the lawyer says, well, it's temporary insanity. Every murder is temporary insanity. Otherwise, why would he kill? But if you say temporary insanity, he's not responsible. People are not responsible for their actions. It's the society. It's the way you grew up. It's the fact that your home was not as stable as it should have been. All the excuses. all of which could be valid, but they are not acceptable. My Rebbe used to say, I remember that once he asked somebody to begin the discussion regarding a certain Tosfos. And the young man said, Rebbe, I didn't review the Tosfos, I don't know it. So the Rebbe said to him, well, why didn't you? And he gave him a good excuse. He said, my sister was ill, I had to take her to the emergency room, and I didn't have a chance to. I didn't get back to the yeshiva to learn. I never had a chance to look at it. So the Rebbe said to him, you have an excellent excuse, and I excuse you. But no excuse equals learning the Tosfos. And that's a rule in life. We think that having a good excuse, so then forget the matter. It's like it never happened. But the truth is, no good excuse ever equals doing it, what you were supposed to do. And Rabbi used to say, Onus Rachmana Patre. If you're forced into something, the Torah made you potter, but the Torah didn't give you credit for it. You're potter. The Avos were responsible people. Everything they did bore the stamp of responsibility. They never offered up excuses. They explained situations, but they did not offer up excuses. Is a description of the society. It's not an excuse. And because Yaakov used subterfuge, his children used subterfuge against him in the story of Yosef. Now Yaakov had the perfect excuse. His mother told him to do it. He had no choice. That doesn't change what did happen. And therefore, eventually there's a price to be paid. So that's part of being a yosher. Straight person is a responsible person. And it's the core value in Judaism is responsibility. There's nothing like it that compares to it. Adam muad la'olam, Chazal say. A person is always responsible. Ben er, ben yoshin, whether he's awake or asleep. Ben shogeg, ben mesid, whether it was an accident or he intended not, doesn't make a difference. Adam muad la'olam, you're always responsible. If a person realizes that one is responsible, so then one behaves differently. One looks at the world differently. Shlomo HaMelech says, "V'Elohim asa es ha'odam yoshor." The Rabbanu Shalom created human beings yoshor, that they should be straight. They should not be hypocrites. They should be responsible people. V'heima bikshu chishbonos rabim. And human beings are always scheming, trying to figure out how to avoid that responsibility. How to put it off on others. And because the Avos were Yesharim, so therefore they raised their children to be Yesharim. And that's why Klal Yisrael was chosen, the Am HaNivchar, to receive the Torah, because the essence of the Torah is responsibility. The essence of the Torah is that I'm responsible to my Creator, I'm responsible to myself, I'm responsible to my family, I'm responsible to my community, I'm responsible to all human beings, I'm responsible. The aim of Bikshu Chishbonos Rabbim, and we're always looking to get out of that responsibility. It's uncomfortable. It annoys us. But the Rebbe Shalom does not allow us to escape. That's one of the lessons of Chumash Bereshis. There's a covenant here. The covenant was made with Avram Avinu and lasts all these 3,700 years. And the covenant binds us. And it demands that we be yashurim, that we be an Adam Yoshar, a good person, a straight person, someone who is able to rise above hypocrisy and projection and be honest with oneself, and one that is responsible. When the Rebbe Shalom called to Avraham, he said, Hineni, here I am, I'm responsible. Throughout the Chumash and throughout the Jewish world since, when the call comes out, somebody has to say, Hineni, here I am. Try me. I'm responsible. That's a great lesson. Great lesson that we learned from the Netziv, that we learned from Chumash Bereshis. So at the end of Chumash Bereshis, like at the end of all the other Chumashim, we will say, Chazak, Chazak, and Yis Chazek. Be strong and strengthen others, always be strong. It's certainly true in our time as well. We've had many low moments, but it's time to strengthen ourselves to the extent that we can. And in Mirz Hashem, the Lord will redeem us from all of these troubles, and we'll be able to continue being the generation of Dor Yesharim. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great Shabbat and Kol Tuv Selah.